showed my deck to a friend of mine, and he said, Dominica, if you're going to talk about defrag in your talk, you might want to define it for the younger crowd and the audience. And so back in the day, before solid-state drives, when files would be on the disk for a while, the sectors would get out of whack, and it would just take a long time to retrieve files. So we used to have to run this utility, this defrag utility, to clean up our disk so we could save some time. And when we look at the value stream, the same thing applies in a way, right? With a defrag, the OS had to chase around the OS had to chase around the hard disk to get everything it needed. Wow. So that's got to be a problem. That's like the context switch, the ultimate context switching, right? Okay, maybe we're good now. So I'm going to talk about 3 things today, basically. I want to address that, what Dave West was talking about this morning about complexity. Complexity drives necessary specialization. Number 2 is that specialization causes expensive disconnects. Right? And 3, how to deal with this. How do we deal with these disconnects and communication debt that occurs because of the specialization? So what's my point? What you're trying to do in enterprise IT is really hard. Right? You've got mergers and acquisitions and thousands of engineers building hundreds of projects or features across dozens or maybe more tools. Right? And because the work is so complex, as humans, we deal with that by breaking it down into smaller chunks of work, and this is what introduces specialization. The hardest thing we do is communicate across teams. And so to solve that problem, we want to try and find and fix the fragmentation across the value streams, these handoffs, these disconnects, this miscommunication that occurs. And this is how we start defragging. This is how we start to find where the flow problems are, the impediments to flow in our value stream. So thing number 1, complexity drives necessary specialization. This is my granddaughter, Kameli. She lives with us. It's a picture of when she was 9 years old. And at 9 years old, she was seeing 4 different therapists. She was seeing a speech therapist because she could not pronounce G or S. She was seeing a physical therapist because she was a bit off balance and she couldn't ride a bicycle. She's seeing an occupational therapist because it's very difficult for her to grasp a pencil. And so her handwriting was rather hard to see. And everywhere she went, every therapist she saw, we had to fill out the same information on all these different forms. None of them were connected. None of the different therapists talked to each other. So it's quite a challenge. All of these therapists were recommended by her primary physician. Right? That was just the first stop. But then, after none of the therapists were able to help, about a year ago, we watched this TED Talk from a doctor on the East Coast, Dr. Karen Pape. And we started to recognize that some of the symptoms of cerebral palsy may have been, ever so slightly were what we were seeing with Melly. And so we live in Seattle, but last February off to New York, Rochester, New York, is where Melly went to go visit Karen Pape's clinic. And it's called Step by Step. And what happened was truly amazing. We went there for 5 days intensive setting. And after 2 days, they recognized that the problem was form. It was all about form. Function follows form. Any athlete will tell you that. And so they put on an arm split and a thumb brace, and after 2 days, she could maintain a pencil grip and write legibly, and we could read it. It was just amazing. And a similar thing happened after day 4 with her speech, which I don't have time to get into now, but she can articulate clearly now. My daughter had spent 7 years trying to figure out what the heck was going on. We went to an expert in this area, and within 4 days, She's functioning quite well. And so we need specialists to deal with complexity. We need them in the medical field, and we need them in technology, too. 100 years ago, we had 2 health practitioners. We had a doctor and a nurse. Today, we have over 120 medical specialties and subspecialties. It's similar in technology, too. When you look at security, for example, back in the early 2000s, we had very few security specialists. And now, with all the security breaches that are happening over time, we need a lot more, right? This visual is from David McCandless. It's called Information is Beautiful. He did a great TED Talk. He builds interactive visuals using data so that people can understand, they can better understand what the impacts of what's happening. So at the bottom here, you saw, like, it goes back to 2004. We just had a handful of security breaches. And then up at the top, it even includes the latest one from Marriott. And the colors are indicative, too. The deeper the red, the more serious the issue. And so, similar to technology, we need more and more security layers and policies that increase complexity. So this is this Wired article that talks about the different expertise that's needed for each different network security device, and how 95% of organizations use network security devices from multiple vendors. And even as more policies and vendors and devices have been added, there's still an estimated 75% of organizations that do their security work, that manually manage their network security. I sent this article to my 2 youngest sons because I thought it was a great opportunity for them. That Forbes article, they're predicting that there's going to be a global shortage by 2019, right around the corner, of cybersecurity professionals. And this, to me, I'm pretty much inspired by Josh Corman's work. So he started this organization called I Am the Calvary. And I have this quote of his in my book because it's so true. We create these temporary Band-Aids to fix something, and 3 years later, we're still trying to maintain them in production. So the Calvary, they focus on issues where computer security intersect with public safety and human life. So this would be medical devices, automobiles, home electronics, and public infrastructure. And an example of their work is this infusion pump that's used in hospitals that allow cyber attackers to take remote control of it. So this is a pump that's used to deliver medical medications directly into the bloodstream of patients in hospitals. And the FDA and DHS found out about it from I Am the Calvary. So the world needs specialists like Josh Corman and Billy Rios. This is a poll from a DevSecOps community survey showing that 48% of developers say they don't have enough time to deal with security. Like the primary physicians, they don't have enough time or knowledge or experience to understand everything that can happen to the human body. You know, even full-stack developers struggle with trying to maintain their relevancy and learn all the new tips and tricks that they need to just to stay current, right? It's hard to stay current. And not everybody wants to do security. According to this survey, 20% are saying, not my job. So with scale comes complexity. And I love this quote from Mick: the more we scale, the more we need specialized people. So thing number 2, specialization. We need it, but it causes expensive disconnects. So back to the medical analogy. If you have a heart condition, you go see your doctor, primary care, and they maybe send you to the lab to get some blood work done, and then you go back a few days later, see your primary care physician, and they say, things don't look good, we need to send you to the cardiologist. So you make another appointment, go to the cardiologist. Cardiologist says things don't look good. They send you off to the dietitian. They send you off to the pharmacy, maybe to get some blood thinners. Of course, everywhere you go, you got to fill out the same information across different forms because they're not talking with each other. Eventually, the dietitian says, hey, you got to stop eating so much bacon, and they send you off to the physical therapist because you got to get some more exercise. And if you still don't take heed, then you end up in the hospital with the coronary, filling out even more paperwork. So the burden tends to lie on the individual to communicate the information. Like my daughter the burden was on her to do the research and communicate between all the different professionals that were servicing her. And the same thing applies, I guess once you get into the hospital, things are connected. But outside of the hospital, the burden's on the patient. So it's disconnected, and the handoffs just aren't as clean as they could be, and there's a cost to it. Outside of the frustration, there's a real cost to it. So my mom was in the hospital getting this heart stress test. She's supposed to get this adenosine, that I can't pronounce right, tracker. And doctor's orders say no caffeine within 24 hours of the test. Well, the morning of the test, the nurse gives my mom coffee, probably because she's impossible in the morning without her double cappuccino, whatever. And so we had to wait a whole nother day, right, and a whole nother 24 hours in the hospital. So the next day she makes it through with no coffee, absolute miracle. They get her in the wheelchair. They wheel her into the lab where they do the trackers. And the pharmacy tech hands the nuclear medicine tech the wrong stuff. So instead of the heart tracker injection that the doctor ordered, my mom gets a bone injection, bone tracker injection. And so at that point I said, bad things happen in threes. So Mom, we got to get out of here. Let's go. U.S. medical errors is the third leading cause of death in the U.S. Over 250 deaths a year, according to this Johns Hopkins article. So there's a huge cost to it. On the software delivery side, we see something similar to this. We've got a portfolio level at the very top. And there's all kinds of programs that they want to get done. And so they get parsed out across all the different organizations and the different programs, and eventually the details dwindle down and spread out across to the individual teams, maybe hundreds of Agile teams. And so the details tend to get lost, right? I was working at a huge retail, and they had hundreds of Agile teams, and they had this concept called an away story. And that was because an away story meant that you had to go away outside of your Agile team to go get information from another team in order to do your work, right? There were so many dependencies for that. So this disconnect between visualizing all the dependencies between the Agile teams made it impossible to see the big picture and impossible to hear about all the communication that was impacting teams. It was hard for teams to anticipate what was going to consume their time. I know we like to work with small, Agile teams. Nothing beats a talented, motivated, cohesive, small team. But just beware that by moving fast as an individual team, you may be paying the price of not moving very fast as a whole organization. And that's what we want to do from end to end. We want to be able to flow quickly. I've got the pizza box there because you have a problem if the pizza delivery person delivers more than one pizza to the same meeting room. Right? If you're using 2 pizza teams, you might see that. So costs from it, we have unhappy employees, unhappy customers. Why? Because things take too long. They can't find their stuff. They're hit up with things like, oh, by the way, there was this database schema change, so the code you wrote 3 days ago isn't going to work. Or, oh, by the way, we have an issue in production. We found out about it 4 days ago, but you, developer, need to have it fixed in production by this afternoon. And it's not benefited by IT being seen as a cost center, right? Versus what Carmen talked about this morning versus an investment. All right, so what to do about this? How do we deal with this communication debt that's related to complexity and specialization? Well, on the healthcare side, I was really happy to see the talk this morning. Thank you. So Jeff Bezos is basically partnering up with Jamie Dimon and Warren Buffett, and they are going to try to take on healthcare. After they made this announcement, healthcare stock in healthcare companies plummeted. So what are they doing? Basically, the problem can be out of control in the healthcare delivery space for what I described previously. You can't just go to one place to get your needs met. You have to go to all these different therapists, and none of them talk to each other. So what Amazon's pushing for is this idea of a one-stop shop for health systems. And we're seeing startups coming out with this too, of just trying to make it easier for the customer to get their needs met without having to fill out 300 different forms, especially when you look at all the insurance forms that need to get filled out. And so the expectation is that this is going to disrupt many supply chains across all industries. On the technology side, we've got our lovely chart here from Zebia Labs that's showing over 120 different DevOps tools. So I used to be a build engineer. My first job out of college was at Boeing. I did builds on IBM mainframes. We had JCL, we had COBOL, we had assembly language, and we had mag tapes. Now we've got 128 different tools just in the DevOps space. So what does this do? Well, here's the reality of the situation now. Teams are they're happily using their own tools to get their work done. If teams are being measured on just their throughput or their performance, there's not much incentive then for them to make sure that we're optimizing value across multiple teams end to end, right? So people are busy working in their own tool. Each team uses a different tool. The tools don't talk to each other, hence we have communication debt. And this is the story of my career. As a build engineer, I've always been at the boundary, at this intersection between development and test and engineering and ops and development and product. And I've had to run around and ask people, can you please open a ticket for this thing? Otherwise it doesn't show up on any system. It turns into unplanned work. If you don't do something like that, then you get this, right? You get communication. It has to happen some way. So you get communication in whatever way is available, whether that's a phone call or an email or a Slack or a spreadsheet or a Gantt chart or what I call a red, yellow, green report that we used to see in PMO land. And you hear arguments. IT Ops is saying everybody should use ServiceNow. Developers at the other end of the table are saying, no, you need to use Jira. I hear these kinds of arguments quite frequently. And we see it on the business side, too. I was working with a sales ops team. These are the people who generate NDAs and terms and conditions and contracts so salespeople can close deals. And I'm working with them, helping them make their work visible, because that's what I do. I help teams make their work visible so that they can find the bottlenecks and work to optimize their workflow, help. Well, sales ops is working in Jira, but sales is working in Salesforce. So how do they communicate? They communicate via email. How many of you still get a work request via email? Yeah, some hands going up. And so what happens? They copy all the information from the email, they put it in Jira, and then they send an email back. And so emails go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, and this impacts communication and collaboration, and it delays delivery. Things take too long is a universal problem. Right? The business understands that too. It's not just an IT problem. So what do we do about this? Well, Carmen and I have been working on this. We call it a value stream canvas. It's not a Kanban board. If you've seen my talks before, this might look like a Kanban board, but it's not. Just think of it as a blank canvas where you can show how your demand arrives. So demand, that's all the requests you get, whether that's an email or a Slack message or something landing in your Jira queue or a walk up to your desk, right? This is demand. And we start with production. Why do we start with production? Because this is your highest priority, right? If production's not working, you're screwed. So let's start with production. That production comes first. It carries the highest risk, right? And then what do we do? Well, where does it go when an incident or a problem arises? How does that get communicated if you need to make a change? If developers need to make a change, how does it get communicated? Just write that down. Like if it's through Slack, then put a little Slack logo there to show how that communication occurs. Then after you've got your communication channels drawn out for production, now look at the other demand that's coming through. Where does the business demand arrive from? How do you get notified of that? If you're in sales ops, that's an email. So if that's how you get the communication, then add the email icon so you can see that. And then take it from there. If features or stories then have to flow into testing, what tool are you using to that? How does that get communicated? And on down. Carmen's going to talk a lot more about this afternoon, but I just want to point out that this is published with IT Revolution. If you go out to their site and look for Mick's book, you'll see this companion piece to it's called a value stream canvas exercise, so you can try it out with your team, see what they think. And we also offer this service to anyone. It's a free service for an hour if you want to get some expert advice and get a picture drawn of your value stream diagram. We offer that. So what's the benefit here? The benefits are transformative. You get speed, right? You get this end-to-end speed we call flow time. From the clock doesn't stop just because it's the weekend. We're going to talk about more about flow time and how you measure that this afternoon. But just seeing how people can improve their predictability when they know how long things are going to take end to end from a customer perspective is so useful. You get visibility of your progress. This is what I call, where's my thing? Because that's one of the other biggest complaints that you hear is everything goes into IT like a black box. Where's my thing? We also get transparency of the information that's from the handoffs. This is to fix what I call communication debt relief. You don't have to dig through email to find important information. You don't have to race around your disk drive to collect the info you need. You don't have a fragmented system if your communication is all synced up. So making connections visible, it helps teams become aware of mutually critical information sooner. And I tell you, it's one of the main reasons that I joined Tasktop, because I spent so much time in my career being this middle person trying to help others communicate, and I see Tasktop as helping to solve that problem. So I don't know if any of you are Cirque du Soleil fans. It's about that time of year, but just like Cirque du Soleil has solid handoffs, so should your value streams. If you want to get a copy of this deck, just send an email to Dominica at sendyourslides.com. Make sure you put flow in the subject, and you should get an automatic reply that has a copy of this deck and some excerpts of my book, Making Work Visible. I just wanted to let you know that one of the things I do for Tasktop is offer workshops on flow, just fundamentals of flow, to help people understand this sort of the change in the way that we're working, to understand that we're interested in looking it doesn't do an organization much good to optimize one single silo, right? Silos serve their purpose. I know this is an unpopular belief in the DevOps space, but silos do serve their purpose because nothing beats a small, cohesive team that communicates well. However, if they need things from other teams and we can't deliver, if what you're delivering cannot be consumed by downstream teams at the rate that you're delivering it, then we got a problem. We've got bottlenecks and constraints in the system. So that's what I do. I help people make their work visible so they can see the bottlenecks and constraints in their system and then help them design flow boards to improve their throughput. And that's it for me. Thank you.